so let it be written, so let it be done. This is Tabletop Terrors. Today we're talking about when should you roll dice in an RPG, or when not to. I'll start by saying, if you have information that is pivotal to what is happening right now, be very careful tying a roll to that. Because if the players fail learning that rumor to know where to go next, then what? Right? So, and I can see that an argument could be made for, well, then they'd have to do this, and then they'd have to do that, and that's fine as long as that's your plan. But if you're like, all right, cool, we're going to go to the next town in this session, so real quick, let's just get the roll out of the way. Go ahead and roll me blah, 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 check, and they just botch it totally. They know they botched it unless you rolled it. So then, are they doubting the information because they rolled a 3? And so, I've heard this done really well, and this is what I've adopted, which is just give them some of the cool details, and it makes it way better. As game masters, sometimes we want to keep a lot of things secret, and I don't think that that's as fun as telling the cool stuff. I'll give you an example. So let's pretend that the players are in this dungeon, and they walk into this room, and there's this interesting carving all over the walls. It can be interesting to discover what that thing is. So don't be afraid to go halfway and say, oh yeah, you would know that. Like, you just tell them flat out. You would know that this is a carving done by the people that built this dungeon, and it looks like it depicts their deities. Super general. That's super general, that you didn't give them any, you didn't give away the farm. They can now, because you've given them some cool information, it prompts them as to what kinds of questions to ask. Let's flip it the other way. They walk in. Strange carvings line the walls. Give me a roll. It's a 3 all up. You know that they're deep. For me anyway, and you guys can feel free to disagree, but I feel like giving them some general information of what you're going for as a game master first, then tying the roll, like, oh cool, I want to roll to see if I know the story of them, or can I do an intelligence check to know if I know one of the deities, or see a pattern, or I want to look for a trap door. Cool, now roll. But I think it's cool to establish a baseline.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. If you're going to have pivotal information for the game, then you want to make sure that people will be able to get that information. And for me, so I guess just outside of just my quick tip, which I'll get into, just my personal preference as a game master, I like to call for my players to roll things rather than have them say that they're going to roll things. It's a very small difference, but it can help kind of prevent sorts of those weird issues of just like, okay, I'm going to roll a perception check. I'm going to roll a history check. I'm going to do all these things. And it's just like, I don't have any information for you to get right now. So like, you're just rolling all these things, asking me for stuff, and maybe I can pull something up out of nowhere and it'll be interesting or cool. But chances are it'd be better if we just kept the story moving for now. So I'm not super strict about it. If a player asks, hey, can I roll an Arcana check to see if I know what this magical thing is? I'll still let them do that. But generally speaking, if I need a roll, I'll ask for a roll, and people can kind of just be confident when they're playing in my games that if I didn't ask you to roll a perception check, you don't need to go out of your way to say that you're going to make a perception check to try to find the trap. I'll let you know to make a perception check. And then as far as just when I call for those rolls, I have a couple of very simple rules that I try to kind of follow, almost like a sort of baseline checklist of, for one, failure needs to be likely in some sense. Like if it's something that they're amazing at, like if they're a rogue and they're just trying to walk, across a narrow pathway, I'll assume that they can do that much. I'm not going to make them roll like a DC 5 acrobatics check to get over the. It's just like, yes, you can just do that. So it needs to be possible to fail. And also failure needs to lead to something interesting happening. If you ask them to do a check and the only thing that happens is if they fail, nothing happens, then that can very quickly start to stall the game really quickly of like, all right, You come across a door. It's locked. The rogue's like, oh, I'm gonna try to pick the lock. Okay, you can't quite get it. Okay, I'm gonna try again. You almost got it that time, but not quite. Okay, I'll do it a third time. Okay, now you got it. Now you got the 18. Now you open the door. It's if there's no sort of pressure for them to succeed right now, and they will eventually get it, then I just let them get it. Just like, you jiggle with it a little bit, and then it opens, rather than like making them roll. Now, a different circumstance where I might make them roll in that situation is if they're at a locked door and the guards are chasing them, and if the guards catch them, they're going to fight and potentially capture them. Now that failure is interesting because each time they can't get through the door, the guards are getting closer. Pretty soon they'll be right on top of them with swords drawn. So if there's no sort of immediate consequence for failing, and the story isn't advanced by success or failure, then I just kind of move along without a roll, because I think it stalls the game, and you can very easily sort of get into these weird loops where nothing's happening because they're just making the check and they keep rolling just under. So yeah, it needs to be. You need to be able to fail. Failure needs to be interesting, and success needs to lead to something. And if not all of those are true, then I just don't even bother rolling in the first place.
So one way I've recently seen that summed up, I'm really interested in this concept because that was something I struggled with a lot, was asking for a lot of rolls, whether they weren't necessary or just required multiples. Was in the 2d20 system, the Star Trek system, they phrase it this way. When a character attempts to complete an activity where the outcome is in doubt or failure is interesting, that's when you should ask for a roll. And Jeff, you summed that up very well, but I'll have that written down on something sometimes. When somebody asks for a roll, I go, well, wait, as ridiculous as it sounds, let me make sure we need a roll, and kind of go through that very quickly. The other important thing is giving players a lot of room to fail, right? It's dangerous. And I don't see this as much, but I've seen it before where it's dangerous for one failure to sort of be the end of something or to halt everything entirely. A good example, actually, Jeff, is, okay, so the rogue, well, you're pretty good at this. So you make it across this beam over this, big chasm, say. But the, paladin with his heavy plate armor is going to have some trouble. So make a roll for me. If the paladin fails, because, you're making him roll because you expect he might fail. The problem is if he falls off to his death, well, that's not very nice. You know what I mean? Like you've gone too far. You've let them fail too much. So it's better, say, the paladin falls and he's hanging on. Now the rogue's on one side and maybe two of the other players are on the other, so they can start to get in on the action. But now, well, he's not going to be able to hold on forever. Roll again. Are you able to hang on while your party, gets something ready to help you? That makes for an interesting situation where, of course, if the paladin just falls to his death, the game is over, at least for that person, and that's no fun. Or they end up in a new area. Now you've split the party. There's a lot of ways to do that wrong, and I think I've definitely handled it poorly. So just remember, your players are going to fail. Make sure that there's room for them to go when they do. Make that failure interesting, even if it's not directly related to that thing.
So in the comments, tell us what you think. I think that this is going to span in terms of opinions. I think we're going to see a spectrum of people who are saying, no, the paladin should fall and die. That's part of the threats of the game. Or I can't believe you would tell the players what was on the wall without them rolling for it. Listen, my mind has been changed before. So yeah, just put in the comments what you roll for and why. And if there's something we didn't mention, we'd love to hear it. Or if you want to give us your opinion on anything else, feel free to do that. So we're Tabletop Terrors. We're all about fun. We love creativity and, of course, tabletop RPGs. If you like that stuff too, consider subscribing to the channel. Give this video a like and a comment. YouTube loves that stuff, so do we. And we'll wrap things up with a Tabtarian toast.
May you mend the first break.
May you kill the first snake.
May you conquer everything you undertake.
Some games have narrative things tied to what happens on the dice, right? So one of my favorites is the idea that sometimes you fail and you did the thing well, like you succeeded. So say in picking a lock, right? There's nobody around, you're picking the lock. You failed the roll. You picked the lock because you're a good rogue, but the alarm went off. Something like that, where sometimes there is room to let them fail, not necessarily directly involving what they were doing, but to still keep making the game interesting. But you don't have to make a rogue be bad at lockpicking every time because he rolled poor.